You know, normally when I think of cheesy, direct-to-streaming sci-fi action movies with aspirations that outstrip their abilities, featuring dodgy green screen effects to save money and starring a bunch of suspiciously big-name actors phoning it in for an easy payday, the service that immediately comes to mind is Netflix, and maybe Amazon, and occasionally Paramount Plus. Generally though, Apple TV tends to be a bit more discerning about what they commission, relying on the old quality over quantity approach, and good lord, we could do with a bit more of that these days. So when I heard that they were releasing a sci-fi action horror flick starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Miles Teller, two actors that I've got a real soft spot for, I promptly hoisted the Jolly Roger and set sail across the high seas. I fired up my totally legit Apple TV subscription and settled in with a pint of bourbon to experience The Gorge. And 2 hours and 7 minutes later, my pint glass was empty, The Gorge was over, and there was a suspiciously warm stain on my couch underneath me. And in all three cases, I was left with the same nagging question. What was ultimately accomplished here? The Gorge is a movie that can't quite seem to decide what it wants to be. Is it a tense, slow-paced, claustrophobic thriller set in a confined location? Is it an intimate character study? An unconventional romance about two people from wildly different worlds finding common ground? A gruesome tale of body horror? An intriguing historical mystery? Or a guns-blazing action flick? Well, the simple answer is yes. The more complex answer is, it tries to be all of these things at once, and because you can only wrap so many wildly conflicting concepts into a single film, it ends up getting in its own way most of the time and generally fails at most of them. Anyway, in order to explain why, allow me to furnish you with a story recap. And I'm probably going to get into spoilers with this one, so if for some reason you really don't want to know what happens in The Gorge, then go find something more productive to do. Anyway, the movie stars Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy as Levi Kane and Drasa, a pair of snipers from East and West that have been recruited by their respective governments to stand watch over a mysterious gorge out in the middle of the wilderness for a period of 1 year. The place is protected by all kinds of tripwires and automated turrets, and their job is mostly to maintain them and act as a last line of defense. The kicker is that they're not there to stop people from going into the gorge, their mission is to stop anything else from getting out. They're not allowed to communicate with each other, and their only contact with the outside world is a radio check once a month.
Really?
Okay, I've got a few questions about this setup. Why the hell would anyone accept a mission that lasts for an entire year to protect an unknown location against an unknown enemy with unknown capabilities? Why would you only employ 2 people to guard such a massive area which requires constant observation? I mean, people have to eat and sleep and crap pretty regularly, all of which take their attention away from the job. You would need at least 3 people on each side working in shifts to maintain any kind of consistent watch pattern, and that's not even allowing for sickness and unexpected injuries. Why are there only 2 watchtowers when the gorge is at least a couple of miles long and the automated defences are repeatedly shown to be insufficient for the task at hand? Also, why are the 2 guards forbidden from communicating with each other when their very survival and the viability of the mission depends on their ability to exchange information and coordinate their defences? Why wouldn't you bail out the moment you came face to face with the horrifying undead monsters that regularly try to climb out of the gorge? Wouldn't that be a very obvious indication that there was something extremely wrong with this place? Anyway, those are all questions for a different movie. A movie that actually cares about making sense. Anyway, as the months drag on, Levi and Drasa eventually start talking to each other by writing notes on sheets of paper and strike up a kind of relationship that culminates in Levi abandoning his post and making a daredevil zipline across the gorge to spend the night with her. I mean, I can't say I blame him. If I'd been alone for months and the nearest woman within 100 miles was Anya Taylor-Joy, I'm pretty sure I'd risk it all to spend some quality time with her too. Anyway, sadly it all goes wrong when Levi's line snaps and he falls into the gorge on the way back, and naturally Drasa leaps right in after him, despite the fact that it's filled with monsters and probably poisonous gas. Anyway, after reuniting with some very convenient timing, they discover the truth about the place. The entire gorge was actually a World War II biowarfare facility that went tits up when an earthquake caused a containment failure and mutated all the researchers and scientists into the monsters we see today. Since then, it's been overseen by a shady defense contractor, because of course it has, and they've been studying the monsters there to produce a new breed of super soldiers. You know, it's like the Resident Evil approach to warfare, where uncontrollable mutagenic pathogens with the potential to spread far beyond the conflict zone are apparently more effective than a bunch of guys with guns. Anyway, whatever. So the two of them have to fight their way out of the gorge and then lure in the evil corporation guys led by Sigourney Weaver, because corporate overlords regularly venture into dangerous war zones to personally oversee search and destroy operations. Then they fight a bunch of really shitty looking drones sent to kill them and trigger the gorge's failsafe system to set off a nuclear blast and wipe out the entire area. Then they hook up again in France a couple of months later and have a nice spot of rabbit pie. And that's it, that's the movie over. You know the old cliche that you can be a jack of all trades but a master of none? Well, that's the one that I think perfectly sums up the biggest problem with The Gorge. It takes a pretty special combination of writing and directing to fuse together romance, horror, sci-fi, action, and historical mystery into one cohesive movie, and as much as The Gorge definitely swings for the fences on this one, it's ultimately trying to do too much with too little and failing to excel at anything. The action scenes are pretty anemic for the most part, and the very obvious reliance on CGI and green screen means that intense battles for survival come across as kind of weightless and forgettable. And they're definitely not helped by Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy, who deliver the kind of indifferent performances you'd expect from two actors holding plastic guns and pretended to fight CGI monsters. Both of them are way better than movies like this, especially Anya Taylor-Joy, who feels badly miscast as a tough-as-nails Lithuanian sniper. I mean, I love her as an actress, but I've never really seen her as a tough, gung-ho action star. Furiosa didn't do much to change that impression, and neither did this film. On the plus side, the script does at least make some attempt to humanise her, giving her an actual personality and character arc, and even allowing her to make mistakes from time to time, which officially makes her better written than about 95% of the boring invincible girl bosses that Hollywood are still intent on shorting out. The horror aspects of mutated monsters and science gone wrong had some potential if they were better developed, but trying to fuse horror and action usually means that something has to give, and in this case, it's the fear factor. The Hollow Men, as they're known, start out as an intriguing threat, but they really aren't that scary once you realise the main characters can mow them down with impunity. Visually, they look like a combination of the infected from The Last of Us and whatever the fuck was going on in Annihilation, and the movie makes the mistake of showing them to us far too early. The mystery aspect of the film is undermined by the complete implausibility of the setup, and when the answers finally do come, they're the usual mix of evil corporations and totally impractical science experiments with no obvious purpose except to set up the rest of the plots. Ironically, the film's probably at its strongest in its quieter moments, when the pace slows down and the script focuses in on the relationship between the two leads. This is clearly where Teller and Taylor-Joy were most invested as actors, and I get the impression this is where the core of the original script began. The idea of a neat little self-contained story about two very different people bonding over unusual circumstances and ultimately having to risk their lives for each other when things go wrong is a decent concept for a short film or a low-budget thriller, but the problem is that it's buried under so many layers of bullshit that it gets lost in the mix. What you end up with, as I said earlier, is a movie that tries to please everyone and ends up satisfying no one, wasting an interesting concept and a pair of talented actors in the process. I mean, if you're really bored and willing to switch off most of your brain for a couple of hours and just watch two people shooting monsters, then I guess there's worse ways to spend your time, but let's be real here, there's also far better ones. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.